Hey guys, MetalJesus here, and now that the Switch has been out for a couple years, I thought it might be a good time to take a look at 8 Switch racing games that you may have missed. This is going to be a mix of new games as well as games that have been out for a while, and maybe those older games got updates that you want to pay attention to now. So let's take a look. So the first game I want to talk about, you see it here, it's called Overlanders, and this is by a company called Rundown Games. And as you can see by the gameplay footage here, it is a racing game that is inspired very much so by Star Wars Pod Racer. Although I have to be honest, this is a little bit tougher, so be warned. And the reason why I say it feels like Pod Racer is because the controls feel very similar to that game where you have the dual analog sticks to help you control, make those really tight corners. Plus it has that kind of slippery vibe that you're used to in that arcade game. And like in Pod Racer, you have weapons and power-ups to boost your vehicle so you get better over time. One really cool aspect of this game is a race where you and your competitors are actually trying to take down this charging beast that is running in front of you. The game calls it a monster hunt, and that's exactly what it is. So in addition to trying to race and not crash into stuff, you're also trying to get close enough to that beast to try to take him down. It's actually a pretty fun mode that I was really surprised to see here. Now overall, I think this game runs really well and it has pretty good graphics, as you can see here, although there are some spots, especially when you're starting a race, where the textures kind of pop in as they're loading, so this game's a little rough around the edges. Just kind of keep that in mind. It's also currently only digital, so there's no physical version of this yet, but I do think it's a surprisingly fun game. It's not perfect, but if you miss playing a new pod racing game, well, definitely check it out. The next game I want to mention is one that you may be familiar with if you played it on mobile, and that is Asphalt 9 Legends by Gameloft. Now the reason I want to mention it here is because some people may not realize it actually got released on the Switch, and the release is kind of interesting. This game is primarily known as a free-to-play game, and when it was brought over to the Switch, it's still available for you to check out for free, and you can play it that way. However, you can also pay the $20, which is what I did, and basically get access to almost everything that you would ever need. Now, because I'd already played this game on mobile, I knew I was going to enjoy it on Switch, so I just went ahead and bought the Starting Racer bundle for 20 bucks, which basically gives you blueprints to unlock a bunch of the more advanced cars right off the bat. It also gives you 200,000 credits to apply to upgrades that you would normally have to grind for, so you don't have to do that, as well as 300 tokens. And if you're not familiar with this series, it's a really cool mix of, say, Burnout and Ridge Racer, because the speed is there, the crashes are there, as well as how the levels are designed. But really, for me, what I love about this game that it does almost better than any other is the drifting. You see, there are a lot of arcade games that include drifting, and some of them do it better than others. Obviously, I mentioned Ridge Racer, which is probably the king of drifting in these games, but I always have this learning curve that I have to kind of fight through to really control the car through turns. Drifting is something that's kind of unnatural to do in some of these games, but in my opinion, actually, Asphalt 9 is one of the best examples of drifting because it's so easy to get into and you master it after basically just one race. And I think the reason why it does it so well is because it doesn't even attempt to try to be realistic in any way. So I just really appreciate the speed of this game. The graphics, as you can tell, are really great on Switch. The controls, just the energy and the excitement of this game, it's pretty awesome. I think one of the downsides to this game is that the free-to-play interface is still included in the game, and as you can see here, it's very cluttered. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's somewhat confusing, but again, thankfully, if you don't want to worry about that, you can just drop the money in the beginning, just buy it for 20 bucks, or maybe even get lucky and get it on sale. I'm definitely glad that the Asphalt series has been brought over to the Switch, with a lot of that free-to-play stuff, stripped out or at least optional, because underneath it all, there is a really solid and really well-made arcade racing game that definitely deserves to be played. Next up is Nickelodeon Kart Racers. As you guys can see by the footage here, this is obviously inspired by some of the classic kart racing games like Mario Kart as well as Crash Bandicoot. And as you would expect, you can play as several Nickelodeon characters, including my favorites. When I saw them on the cover, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, one thing I want to mention is that there are several difficulty settings and the game defaults to beginner, which if you look at this footage, it might seem kind of slow, especially if you've been playing these kind of games for a long time. It wasn't until I went into the menu and increased the difficulty, I was like, oh, okay, that's how it speeds up the game, which then started to feel more natural. But it is nice that they include the beginner mode here if you're new to these kind of racing games. Now, being that this is a Nickelodeon game, of course Slime is going to play a role in it, and the way it works here is that Slime actually builds up boost, and so you want to drive over it as much as possible. And what's funny is because when I first started playing this game, I was so used to trying to avoid things like, you know, oil slicks that originally I was just, I avoided them, which is the totally wrong thing that you would want to do. And what's cool is that some levels have you racing in rivers of slime that then starts to feel very similar to, like, say, the Sonic All-Stars Racing, where now you're kind of on a boat-like device, and it kind of changes up the way that it controls and, you know, mixes the game up nicely. Now, if you do extremely well in a race, you might earn a victory lap, which is basically a minute of you on the track alone trying to collect as many coins and mystery boxes as possible, which in turn will give you some random loot that you can then use to get new paint, you know, schemes or upgrades and more money. And I gotta say, the level design in this is really well done. As you can see by this footage here, they're very colorful, very fun to explore, sometimes almost overwhelmingly, kind of like Mario Kart, where you get distracted by all the stuff in the background. But again, something I was really surprised with. This looks like it might be a budget title, but it doesn't look like it, doesn't feel like it. So I guess I would say that this is a pretty well-made kart racing game on the Switch. It's way better than you would think. So if you're into kart racing games, you've already played some of the big name ones like the Mario Karts and stuff like that, definitely check this out. Here's a game that I've talked about before, but I want to bring it up here again because, again, the Switch version is so great, and that, of course, is Riptide GP Renegade. Now, if this kind of game looks sort of familiar, well, it's probably because this was made by the excellent programmers over at Vector Unit. Now, they have some of the same people who also worked on some of the Hydro Thunder games, and honestly, this is one of the best arcade racing games, I think, in the last several years. And this game definitely follows in Hydro Thunder's footsteps, where you're racing on water, you're doing tricks for boost, as well as you can upgrade your vehicle and fully customize it. And this is a really nice looking game, both in its level design as well as the water effects. Those water effects there, they're just top notch. And I like how the level designs are very fantastical, like they were in Hydro Thunder, where it's kind of futuristic. You're not exactly sure what's going on, but it's a cool place to race through. The trick system is surprisingly deep and something you're definitely going to want to spend some time mastering because, like other games like Splashdown or SSX Tricky, you're going to want to do that because if you land the trick, you can get boost, which is essential to winning races. One hint I would give you if you're playing this game and you're getting stuck is that upgrades definitely matter in this game because if you're struggling to get first place and unlock the next level, well, it's most likely because you need to upgrade your vehicle or perhaps maybe unlock a better one. So sometimes you end up having to replay previous levels that you've already beaten just to get more money so that way you can get the next vehicle. I tell you what though, I've played this game on multiple systems now and I definitely consider it a modern racing classic. I'd love to see them do a sequel. Here are some racing games that some of you might already be familiar with. That, of course, is Gear.Club Unlimited 1 and 2. But what you may not know is that they also released a Porsche expansion to the second game. And that expansion includes a new seasonal game mode, as well as 3 new championships. It also comes with a bunch of new Porsches that you can unlock, as well as a legendary Porsche that you can win as a trophy. But really, that's just adding to a series of games that are already rock solid on the Switch. Now, if you've never played the Gear.Club Unlimited games on Switch, well, as you can see here, they're very much inspired by the Forza series, and actually, when the first game came out on Switch, It was filling a need that I felt was sorely missing on Switch because, you know, there were a couple arcade racing games, but nothing like this, nothing where they took, you know, realistic graphics with real cars in kind of realistic scenarios. And, you know, it filled that void very well. Its two big features are very similar to Forza. For instance, this line here on the road, now you can toggle that if you don't like it, but basically that's giving you real-time feedback as to the best line that you should be taking around corners, as well as, you know, telling you if you're going too fast or not. And the other feature that's really handy is a rewind time feature. So anytime that you screw up on a corner or maybe you hit a car and you just want to do a do-over, well, you can hold down a button, back up time to right before you screwed up, and then take another run at it. And there doesn't seem to be any penalty in using that feature, so use it as much as you want. It's a great feature to have in the game. One of the biggest complaints against this series, and I would probably agree, is that they tend to be a little bit on the bland side. Now, don't get me wrong, the graphics, the cars, the controls, the racing, everything feels great. But there's no soul to this game. It feels very empty and very cold. Now, they do have some talking heads, these little, you know, line-drawn characters here, but honestly, you just kind of skip past it. You don't care. So it would be cool if in the next game in the series, if they would look towards Forza Horizon or, you know, even the Need for Speed series and just put a little bit more personality into it. I think that would go a long ways into making these just a little bit more popular. Now, I do want to mention something, and that is if you're like me and you like to collect the physical versions of these games, well, don't be tricked by this case, because I actually bought this at a GameStop and I assumed that the Porsche stuff was going to be on the cartridge, and it is not. It's actually a download code in there. So just be aware, a bit of a bummer, but it's still a really fun game. Here is Horizon Chase Turbo, another racing game that I've talked about on my channel previously, but the reason why I want to bring it up here in this video is because since the making of that one, they've actually released two big updates that I think are worth talking about. Now, if you're not familiar with this game, well, you are in luck, because as you can tell by this footage here, this has a great old school vibe to it, really tight controls, and just over the top speed. I definitely like the art style in this game. It's both a throwback to those classic Super Nintendo Genesis games, but it's also somewhat modern looking. And there is already a ton of content included on the retail release. There's a ton of races and tracks to explore. As a matter of fact, there's an entire world that you scroll around and you can just travel from country to country, city to city. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of reasons to go back and replay this game and try to get gold medals in every single location. And one of the things that really sets this game apart to me is that you have to pay attention to your fuel, which is very old school feeling, because as you race, your fuel is slowly going down and you can barely lose a race if you don't pay attention and refuel. Now, you'll see little fuel cans on the track, and so again, don't ignore those. You have to pick them up. And the developer continues to support this game. So the first thing I want to talk about is the free DLC that you can download that adds a beginner mode. Now, this is really nice if maybe you're new to this style of arcade racing game, or maybe you're just a casual player. Download the beginner mode and check it out. I mean, again, it's free. And then for only $2, they released this DLC called Summer Vibes, which is basically a love letter to Outrun. In that DLC, you get a new exclusive car, which is a tribute to the classic convertible Ferrari that you would drive in Outrun. Also, they took 12 roads out of the main campaign and then redesigned them for kind of a summer vibe. And then finally, they strung them all together so you could technically drive from coast to coast, kind of like on your own mini vacation. So yeah, Horizon Chase Turbo was already a really fun arcade racing game that they made even better with that DLC. If you haven't played it, definitely check it out. And then there's two games here at the end that I want to mention, more as honorable mentions, and the first one being Fast RMX. Now, this game is going to be very familiar to people who bought a Switch at launch, because this was a launch title. And it came out at a time when there really wasn't a lot of arcade racing games, and this one just blew people's minds. This game is excellent. But I wanted to mention this game because if you came to Switch a little bit late, well, you may have missed this title, because now there's a ton of games in the eShop to choose from. As you can see by this footage, Fast RMX is obviously inspired by F-Zero as well as the Wipeout series. It's got that futuristic design, it's got that insane sense of speed and really tight controls. This game introduced this really cool phase shifting mechanic where at the push of a button you can switch between either yellow or blue phase, which will give you a boost depending on if you match the color that is on the track. In the beginning of this game, that's somewhat optional, but as the tracks get more and more complex and the games get faster and there's bigger jumps and tougher computer racers to go against, well, you're definitely going to want to master that phase ability. And then there's the game Grip, which I've talked about on my channel before. It's come out on the Switch, but you can also get it on other consoles as well. And this is basically a spiritual sequel to the PlayStation 1 classic Roll Cage. Now, the premise of this game and the reason why it's called Grip is because your futuristic vehicle doesn't really have any up or down, and the tracks are designed to take advantage of that. What that means is that during a race, you'll be on the ground, but then all of a sudden you'll find yourself on the ceiling, you'll find yourself on the sides. It's absolute madness. There really isn't any right way to go through these tracks, and it becomes chaos at times. Now, admittedly, this was originally released in somewhat of a rough state that kind of disappointed some fans of the original game, but the developers have patched and updated this quite a bit based on community feedback. It's not a perfect game, but it is a pretty fun arcade racing game, and I go back to it time and time again. Alright guys, well, that's a quick look at 8 Switch games that I feel like should not be missed, but there are a bunch of other games that I could have mentioned. So I would love to know what games you think that I should check out, as well as others who are watching this video. Please post a comment below because, as you guys know, the eShop is filled with games and sometimes it's hard to find the good stuff. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching, thank you for subscribing, and take care.